Print Your Games, podcast about what's new and awesome in 3D printing for gamers. I'm one of your hosts, Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Param, and I'm joined by.
Kristen Sowards, also known as Seventh Mastery.
And we've got a fun episode to chat about because there's been a lot of movement in game space and 3D printed space and tangentially related to things we are involved in. We're going to be talking about official Lord of the Rings 3D printable minis. We're going to be talking about a whole bunch of not 5th edition games got announced
Right,
recently
new
that you might want to
games.
play. And will definitely affect the market considering how much of these products ship with 5e stats.
Right.
But before we jump into all the topical stuff, Kristen, what have you been up to lately? We haven't got to do this in a little bit.
Yeah. It's been a busy. Like, I mean, everybody, we were talking how I've been through
Mhm.
what I'm on my eighth bottle of resin already this year, and yeah, I did a bunch of stuff for my home games, obviously, but the biggest thing I got ready for was the world record D&D game down in Provo, Utah. It was at the
Mhm.
mall. There was over 1,200 people involved. 1,227, I believe, was the number for the record. And we
Cool.
talked about we thought maybe it was higher than that, but turns out it was only just under like 500 was what was the old record.
I'm
Record.
curious
I'm not
about
talking about
this.
events anywhere. I'm talking about submitted to Guinness.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's
Submitted to
fair. You
Guinness.
actually have to have the person come out and do your thing, and it was
Right.
so it is now the official
Yeah.
world record.
Okay.
It was super cool. We did a whole bunch of it was a big
Mhm.
undead thing versus Vecna, very kind of classic. Eldath, goddess of peace, versus Vecna trying to ascend to godhood. And I had all
Mhm.
sorts of super cool minis I did. I did Undead Griffins. I actually got to finish a lot of my Plague Demon army. I painted the Griffins up with kind of like a, what was it, Tesseract Glow underpaint. So they kind of like,
Mhm.
which I kind of blatantly stole from your mist blue glow on your undead. I was like, oh,
Please
that's
do
such a neat
still.
effect. Love it, love it. So
Mhm.
yeah, those were great. I ended up using those so uh white werewolf tavern griffins.
Mhm.
I really liked them. Yeah. There's they were pretty much done at that point. I painted up some armor on them, some other stuff, and you can see there's a creature caster
Mhm.
undead there too, and a couple other things. But my plague army got a good push to being done. I could probably actually play a 2,000 point plague army if I needed to, pretty easy now at this point.
Ooh, yeah. Yeah,
So yeah,
it's really cool. First, awesome that you got to play this massive game, and a really cool opportunity to bring some 3D printed gaming material to an audience.
yes,
Also, this is
yes,
a very green, this is a very verdant zombies. I like it.
yeah.
For our listeners, he has painted up a whole bunch of big old fat zombies with open bellies, some weird, gigantic, way too many mouth zombies, a bunch of little zombies and cultists, and like 3 griffins that have been like all painted green and ghostly and stuff. I imagine because they as undead griffins.
They're undead griffins, and they were ridden by cultists in the module. But the coolest thing is they dive bombed people with undead, so they would fly over during other combats and drop more zombies on people. And so the idea this these griffins were like flying from table to table and doing that. And then
Hmm.
there was a scene, at least at my table, because it was one of the big coordinated, kind of like a live play from the the big not live play, the special plays from Pathfinder kind of used to be,
Right.
or are, I guess.
Mhm.
Multiple tables. There was different zones. There was a gates section, a walls section, a outriders section, and so it was actually kind of cool because players got to do different stuff, and everybody got kind of compare experiences at the end. And there was a internal city watch. I did the gates.
Hmm.
My table was gates. They were amazing, and we did not fall, but the walls fell. But the zombies, the vile griffins, were dropping zombies, dive bombing people, and eventually they came down in my fight and had cultist wizards on their back shooting people. So it was pretty nasty. We were encouraged to be very brutal, and I
Hmm.
actually headshotted a dying sorcerer. It's not my normal DM jam. I had to seek some aftercare after that. It was bad.
I'm sure that the dying sorcerer takes consolation in knowing you felt guilty about it.
Oh yes. It was his first character that ever died. It was his second D&D character he'd ever made.
Hmm.
So I got his scar of being his first character death. But we're good friends, so it's gonna be okay, I think.
Had so you all were playing what, 5th edition?
It was 5th edition.
Mm-hmm.
It had slightly some customized rules about dying. They could get resurrected because there was like a big miracle spell cast to like turn the tide of the war. And but people came back wrong. And I don't know if you've ever played with those sort of rules where people come back wrong. This particular one, for instance, the character lost the ability to attune magic items. You don't get very many magic items in 5e anyway, so to lose that was kind of rough. Fortunately, the player was a good sport about it, didn't care so much. But they had rules that's like this whole extra table about how you died and came back. That was really neat. Had a lot of fun ideas, some pretty interesting role playing encounters. At ours, they had to start with refugees were flooding into the city as the army came closer, and they had to guess whether or not a refugee party was cultists trying to sneak into the city and do bad things, or if it was real earnest refugees. And then they had events that would modify based off of whether or not they let in the right people. And so like if you they let in a bunch of innocents in mine. They were actually really good at telling who was bad and who wasn't. But then those became points they had to protect because they had put them in buildings across the map, like to hide them. Mm-hmm. And then when monsters got into the city, because the wall team failed. Mm-hmm. And so there was massive incursions into the city. So they had to run back into the city to save the people that they had let in that they knew were okay. So it was a fun interactive event. I really liked it.
Okay. So what all 3D printed goodness did you bring to this big event?
Everything there's 3D printed in that picture. So I brought, let's see, Dragon Trapper's Lodge. I did their Eldritch Lodge cultists for this. Mm-hmm. I did Heroes Infinite. We had their Plague Maidens, I guess. They're very close to the Plague Bearers minis, but they're all female, and they've got some really gross in-trail things happening that I probably won't describe too much.
Okay, thank you.
Creature caster's big boy zombie. I love him because his mouth, because I have some of the kind of nurgly looking plague tummies. Those guys are actually from a Blood Bowl team that I was just on, Cults, I believe. But the creature caster one's like big maw is in his armpit. Which is just such a weird placement, but it was neat. And point of etiquette for folks: no matter how excited you are about somebody's minis, don't just grab them, because somebody grabbed one of my griffins, was so excited to look at it, and pulled it up, broke the arm off of the creature caster mini there, and also broke the griffin off of its rock. And I felt really like I knew 3D printing, it's resin is fragile. We all know this. And I did a pretty good job transporting it down there, but I knew it was fragile. So like, I didn't like get like completely bent out of shape. I did spend an inordinate amount of time looking for glue, but I didn't
this
find
is
any.
Why at these live events, you always need to have the med kit. Anytime I go to any miniature event, or anytime I go to a convention, or any game day at my local store, and heck, even at my local stores, they have the med kit there at the counter, which is activator, super glue, plastic glue, the stuff you need to quickly repair a broke mini.
Yeah. But event was successful. We got the world record and everything, and I am now like once more again in love with Tesseract Glow. So it made me move to my next army project, which is I'm calling it the Sylvanaught Army. So I've started printing all those.
So Tesseract Glow is definitely one of those paints that, like, there's not a lot of options for it in the space. This like bright neon watery wash that just does so much work for making something look like wrong but also magical. There's not a lot of options available for something like that. Also, it's actually surprisingly hard when you're looking for miniature to paint to find anything that's like bright lime green or yellow green. There's a few of it, but when you go down to most of your local hobby stores, bright colors seem to be allergic to bright colors. Everything's like muted brown and stuff. It's like if this wasn't designed to storm the beach of Normandy, your hobby store is not going to carry it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like I think Tesseract Glow is kind of our precursor to the last generation. They called them contrast paints, but they're really just highly pigmented washes.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think Doomfire Magenta, and there's a couple of those yellows that just barely came out that are just kind of catching up to it in terms of their vivid usefulness for this sort of project. Although I don't know that I have a Doomfire Magenta Griffin in my future, but I'm sure it could be used for some good effects. I actually saw some really cool prismatic weapon tutorials about using this sort of thing with a secondary dilution of medium to do a prismatic glaze that I might be trying out, although I'm not necessarily sure for what. But
So obviously they were excited. This is like, what was the reactions? Obviously they were excited to see your minis, so much so that they got handsy.
oh yeah, yeah. I think people were totally into it. My table was really into playing with it. They got like super like fair warning to people, you're going to print really cool 3D minis that make the exact match for your scenario. Be prepared for people who are visually stimulated to get super stimulated and pound your table and shake your minis. I feel like I was running around.
This is why I have to print stuff with Tenacious, because like, I
Yeah.
want my minis to survive being spiked off a volleyball court.
Yeah. Now, to be fair, this did okay. Only that one kind of super, handsy kind of where he reached down into the pile of minis and jerked it out was really the only bad thing. But yeah, they were super into it. I had 3 brothers that were playing with me, and then a couple people from one of my Saturday normal 5e games, which we went and played immediately after it. It was like a whole weekend of gaming.
Awesome. Did you see anybody else using 3D printed stuff?
Yes, but not nearly as many people as I thought. Most people, I ran into a lot of people who were using like Etsy bought 3D prints, and of course was recognizing like where things were from. It was kind of funny because we had a little sub community of the DMs because I got there at 8. The event wasn't till noon, and as we were all setting up, those of us who had our big piles of gray goo that had been printed definitely all saw each other out, and we were like exchanging notes. There was an FDM master level printer guy that his city wall was just epic, and he'd done some background stuff, buildings that weren't even on the map and didn't need to be, but they were back behind everything, and they served as his dungeon master screen. He actually had 2 parts of the panels that had a built-in DM screen. I didn't ask where he got it from. I should have. But he also built dice towers into his city wall, one player facing and one DM facing, so the players could come over, and if they wanted to roll an important roll, they could throw it into the dice tower. And I'm not normally a big dice tower thing, but when he built it into this whole like city diorama thing, that was pretty rad. And his players just ate it up. They were freaking out.
That sounds cool.
There was the boss fight, which was as Vecna was getting destroyed, he like projected himself out across the battlefield in an attempt to survive, and people had to chase down his mini boss versions, his vessels or whatever they were. And so everybody got to kind of make their "What's your vessel of Vecna" mini, and like I saw some very creative 3D prints for that. People got like, it was weird. It was omitted from the module, and so we didn't get the stats until the morning of. And so people just kind of made it up. All of us were like, I don't know, it's this, it's that, it's this. And so we just got to kind of run with them. And just it was this weird point of creativity that everybody got to throw out. Was really fun.
Nice. Awesome. Yeah, I'm really glad. I'm expecting, like, the last couple of cons I've been to, it's been really neat to see, oh, there's some 3D printing stuff. There's some pretty big stuff. But it has kind of exploded this last year. So I really expect like going up to this Gen Con to just be like a wash in 3D printed stuff.
I hope so. We'll see more of it. Yeah. There are things you can do. Like we've talked about before, 3D printing. One of the battles involves a broken bridge. And like tracking down a broken bridge last second, because of course we didn't get the module in time for me to at least have done that. But some people had somehow got that information early. And so I saw some 3D printed broken bridges that were just amazing. And I was like, trying to like, can I break a resin bridge? There was some like Woodland Scenics bridges and stuff. I was like, am I going to pay $20 and shatter that resin bridge? I was like, I'm not going to do that. But I would have done it if I had, just a little bit more time. And you can probably find, I bet you, if we looked right now, we could find a broken bridge mini that would have worked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Of course, sitting here, I'm thinking like, you could just go to a pet store, get one of those bridge things, and just
from a fish tank. That would have worked. Yeah,
I've got several of those that I use in my wargaming scenes and stuff because, like, listen, go if you're trying to get terrain in a hurry, go to your local pet shop and look at some of the stuff there. Now, be careful. Because some of those fish tank stuff cost way more than Forge World, like hundreds of dollars for some of those fish tank stuff.
Some of it's super cheap.
Yeah, but you can get some super cheap stuff, and like bridges and tiny huts and all kinds of stuff is easy to find.
One of the crafting Facebook groups I'm in found a big skull thing they did. That was a fish tank thing at Petco, and people were super excited by that. But anywho, speaking of exciting, I think we got some games to talk about and stuff, and there's lots of people in chat.
Yeah. We got a question from Dad's RC Workbench. Have you tried the Vallejo Express paints? Just wondering if they are better than Army Painter Speed paints. I haven't. Have you touched them yet, Kristen?
I have not. I was looking at one of the preview videos, and actually also they did a new line of game color that were a little bit more, are getting very favorably compared to Pro Acryl, which I think is good. But, for me, that would just be another source of thing because I'm not going to replace my Pro Acryl anytime soon.
Right. Yeah, this big old box from Army Painter showed up for me the other day.
Oh, you got it?
Yeah, so I haven't opened it yet. I've opened the box to see that it's in there, but I haven't gotten to
You didn't tell me.
Yet. I wanted to tell you on the show. Content.
So jealous. Okay.
Yeah, cool. So I'll definitely be playing with that soon and seeing how they handle it. So that Pro Acryl is like my go-to layer paint right now, and using the homemade medium stuff, you can get Pro Acryl to behave like a contrast paint fairly easy. The Midwinter Minis recipe for their mixing medium is what I go with. Though I have a label maker, so I put Param's mixing medium on the side of it. So
of course you do.
Yeah. It's fun, and also use it to like. It's also like the base I use with the inks when I'm making my homemade contrast stuff. So it's really good. So the recipe, in case you're interested, is just you take acrylic matte medium and mix it 50-50 with distilled water. And then 1 drop of flow improver. And if you do not have flow improver, you can use Dawn dishwashing liquid and put 1 drop of that into a standard 17 milliliter bottle. I also put in a couple of mixing beads in there and shake it so I can shake it on up. And that stuff is magic.
Would you use like Liquitex matte medium, or is there a specific one you like?
I use Liquitex matte medium.
Yeah, okay, that's what I've got too.
Yeah. So like it's just absolute magic using that with your paints to thin it out, because like you can go super thin all the way down to glaze, or you can go about medium thin, like 50-50 with paint, and then that paint will suddenly behave like a contrast. So you can get like really good thin, especially with Pro Acryl, because Pro Acryl is kind of watery. It is a little bit thinner than most paints.
Well, I think it's meant to be used in airbrush as much as it is by paint.
Right, yeah. So, and it goes beautifully through an airbrush. I love using my Pro Acryl in an airbrush. Yeah. So I'm really looking forward to getting some painting done this week. It's been a very busy week. It's been like adjusting to the new job has been a roller coaster of fun.
I bet.
And other things. But I'm really excited about some upcoming projects. Like I really want to print Rat Mommy, which is the god titan for the rat men. The OPR rat men is just being called in the community Rat Mommy.
Mommy.
It's just a gigantic rat goddess.
They're getting a whole bunch of friends. If you like the old demony ones. Wow, the Arcane Arc Villain's doing another big Demon Rat
Ooh.
add-on.
Ooh.
Outbreak 2, I think they're calling it, or something.
Yeah. The other big printing project that I'm working on besides the con stuff is that it turns out one of our listeners, David Wickham, is going to be at TMX. So, hey,
Ah,
David in chat, howdy. So we're getting a game together.
cool.
Originally, we were talking about 1,500 points of Age of Fantasy, and then we realized that's a lot to carry to a convention.
Skirmish. Do skirmish.
Yeah, so we've since settled on 300 points of Grimdark Future Firefight.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So that'll be real easy. I can put like 3 or 4 different armies in just like a belt pouch and be good to go. And I've been building some.
It would be my casters and like a couple like support minis. That'd be done.
I've been building some lists to do, and like I need to change my tactic because it's like one of my list has 4 models in it and the other one has 3, and it's just not a good plan. It's not a good plan at all to do it this way.
I don't know. David says I can carry my army in one hand.
Oh, David showed me this really cool army they were putting together of Beastmen that's like 12 figures for 1,500 points of Age of Fantasy, because
Nice.
it's all like the elite big stompy minotaurs and then like the big giant to round it out. So it's like a few groups of 3 minotaurs and then a big old giant and like a hero and a caster. David says it's 25 minis. 25 minis. Okay, sure. And also it's Beastmen, so like contrast paint is like the best way, or speed paint is just the best way to get that fur textures done instantaneously. So it's like it would take all of an afternoon to paint an entire army.
It's about to say fur and feathers, if you're not too picky, can go really fast with contrast. So
Yeah, and feathers go real quick with an airbrush, and you can get some really cool
he
effects.
says brute character, 12 brutes, 1 brute giant, and 10 doggos. I just would have to say doggos in June. Dragon trappers. Those dog army is gonna be a thing.
So I'm going to get some games in. I'm looking forward to that. And I'm not looking forward to the 14 hours of driving involved in that. I'm going to split that up over 2 days. I'm not going to do one giant haul.
Yeah. When is that again?
June 3rd and 4th is the actual event. I'm gonna start traveling June 1st.
That's a lot.
Yeah. It's gonna be fun though. I'm looking forward to it. And I'm also looking forward to getting to play with David and meeting some people up there. It's gonna be fun. But speaking of other things that are fun and kind of unbelievable, did you know, Kristen, there is now official Lord of the Rings 3D printable miniatures?
I did, but only because of you.
Yes. So, and miniatures might be stretching it. Actually, we know that there are 3D printed miniatures involved.
Right.
We just know that there's one available.
Right.
So,
I'm gonna just throw in one too before you start this. New official lore, technically, kind of.
Technically, yes. So it is the Red Scribe painting competition is what we're talking about. And it is being held over on My Mini Factory of all places, of course. And it's to celebrate the Lord of the Rings Rise to War role-playing game that's coming out, or Lost Odyssey role-playing game. I'm really not sure where the names of these fall down on. It's the Lord of the Rings role-playing game, the new one. I'm guessing that's the 5e compatible one that everybody's been chatting up lately.
Wouldn't be surprised. I just am surprised because it says 20 years after Return of the King. We don't have any after Return.
That is true.
And that to me is a huge deal for the Tolkien fans.
So this is set. What this is it's tying into a live play for Extra Life. Elijah Wood is promoting it, and the players they have for it are Sala Baker, Deborah Ann Wool, TJ Storm, Reggie Watts, and Luke Gygax. We'll be playing different characters for the game.
And those look like those are printed minis too, don't they?
Yes. So What has happened is they've released the big villain for this live play story, and that's going to tie into the role playing game, which is the Red Scribe, which is this big, flowy, ring wraith looking character, but red instead of black. So it would be a weird name if it
Also,
was.
kind of vibes a little King in Yellow remix here to me.
So Printed Obsession designed the miniature, and they're holding a painting contest for who can paint the best Red Scribe. So you can go download the model completely for free off of My Mini Factory. But that for a limited time, it's not going to be available forever. So this is like a tiny little bit of 3D printing history. So definitely go grab the model if nothing else, right quick. And Titan Forge got involved, and they designed all of the characters that they're going to be playing in the game, which is pretty cool. There's like 2 hobbits. There's really cool lore master, like big old bulky dude with axe, an elf ranger, and a big old stocky dwarf. All kinds of like traditional Tolkien expected fun stuff. And Print Your Monsters was also involved. They made the box that they put the minis in for the big live stream recording, and this is all to benefit charity. So all that is good. Extra Life is an absolutely wonderful charity that you should absolutely support. I know that lots of people have done Extra Life streams. I've done an Extra Life.
I've done one too.
Yeah, and it's kind of cool because, like, hey, Lord of the Rings official 3D printed stuff is big news. Like we've been talking about, various other smaller and bigger companies getting involved. It doesn't get more notable than Tolkien when it comes to. And I'm also kind of curious as to how this came about, because I thought the rights to Lord of the Rings miniatures is kind of this weird thing, because Games Workshop obviously has a license.
But isn't their license tied to the movies?
Yes, it is tied to the movies.
And I think this is tied to the books. Maybe.
But it's using the movie logo.
That is interesting.
So I don't know how that's involved, but I do know other things based on the movies has come out, because like WizKids put out a line of miniatures that were a version of HeroClix that was, and that's technically a miniature battle game that's technically a direct competition to War of the Ring. And then of course, or Middle Earth battle game. They've changed the name of that game so many times.
I feel like they've released it a bunch of times too, just not calling them new editions. But
the very first one was just the Fellowship of the Ring, which is a cool name for a game. But
oddly, we carried it at Barnes and Noble when I worked there, which is weird. It was the only time we've ever carried minis. Well, when I was involved.
Yeah. So I'm hoping this is kind of just a sign of the times, because we've talked about like manufacturing stuff traditionally is expensive, and like lots of game companies go out of business, even gigantic ventures with big companies, when it involves like producing miniatures and physical components like this. And that's before the world got crazy with shipping and production costs and overseas nonsense. But like I mentioned these Rune Wars behind me that I got for $1 a starter set. That was Fantasy Flight freaking Games, and that was a flop. And like that didn't make the muster. And if Fantasy Flight Games can't get something going, that's a big deal. But like a lot of that risk just disappears once you make it 3D printed manufacturing is go. And we're seeing a lot of examples like with these specialized printers that are designed to just print spit, like to do automated batch printing. We're seeing that at scale distribution using additive technologies, various forms of 3D printing is possible, like especially at the scale that gamers need. I mean, Etsy's just flooded with people that have made. You mentioned it during your show. Like Etsy is just flooded with people with merchant licenses selling amazing quality prints at fairly cheap prices that shows like, hey, this is a profitable possibility. Privateer Press is obviously doing it, like they're 3D printing all of their War Machine. And so I'm hoping that this is just one more step in this becoming a more and more legitimate way to get official stuff. Like at this point, we've got Modifius on board, we've got War Games Atlantic on board, Mantic's doing some stuff. Lots of bigger and medium and small companies getting involved, and then when you tie it into like a major property like Lord of the Rings, I just didn't expect that. Like,
Nope.
as much as I respect Star Trek, I have to admit that that brand doesn't have the cachet that it had 20 years ago. So,
Sure.
like, yes, in the gaming space, Lord of the
Although
Rings just is
Picard was
still
really
working.
good.
Yes, Picard is great, but Lord of the Rings has been having major pushes for like. There's the new series that just was out last year. That's still a hot property.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And it's also a property that doesn't like to license itself out very much.
That's the thing that surprised me, because I feel like that's been such a guarded thing, and it feels like for some reason maybe it's that new Amazon movie or series that just like cracked the seal, because I feel like we're getting all sorts of new content. And like I said, I'm more excited about lore because I'm going to be super direct here. That's always been a sacred cow in the gaming community that people kind of rally around, that we can't change fantasy because Tolkien. And I'm like, no, let's change Tolkien and then fantasy will all change. And, maybe a lot of people don't like hearing that, but I think it's due. It's due.
I think Japan has been doing like a lion's share of the work in changing the concepts of fantasy.
Oh, sure.
With like the rise of anime, isekai, and video games, where they are just like, they're just going off the deep end with some of the crazy stuff they're coming up with that is just like legitimately cool and fun and original. And those anime becoming more, and those video games becoming more and more commonplace, are helping to pry fun fantasy from the dead jaws of Tolkien. And I love Tolkien.
I do too. I do. But
I love me some hobbits. My handle's Param Underhill for a reason.
Yeah.
But I also do enjoy like more original takes on fantasy, and like I love me some Sanderson. I love me
and just living, breathing fantasy worlds too. Like the collaborative nature of gaming and the feeling that people who are entering the space brand new could still possibly impact it. I think that's really important, because I'm a grognard, but I'm not going to be around forever, and I want those people who are coming into the hobby to feel like they can change things, and that's I'm excited to see some of the bigger properties finally loosening up.
Well, speaking of changing things with some of the bigger properties,
whatever could you be talking about?
This has been a week for announcements of new games that are meant to rival D&D, including D&D itself.
Yep.
So over the past, and the reason we're talking about this is if you've looked at just about any one of the Patreons, they almost always come with 5e stats. Almost every Patreon going, especially if it has any sort of role-playing bent at all, comes with 5e stats.
It's true.
Yeah. So this is going to affect the stats that we are involved in. So let's start with the official. Dungeons and Dragons has announced that the next edition of Dungeons and Dragons is still 5th edition.
Still 5th edition, yep.
And 100% backwards compatible with 5th edition.
Yep. And they've said you can even play, if you want to play a ranger from the new PH, you can still play a ranger in the same party from the old PH. That's their promise.
We'll see. I don't know how practical this commitment's going to be. I can understand the desire, because if I'm Wizards of the Coast, and I'm not Wizards of the Coast.
No, you're not.
Yeah. And if I'm Wizards of the Coast, I am kind of terrified of chasing away this golden audience that they've acquired, because like D&D has never been bigger than this.
Never.
Now. Like even back in the 80s when D&D was crazy, it was not as big as it is now.
Yeah.
And it's mostly a new audience. It's mostly a new audience that did not have a background in role-playing games before, which is
the place where we played that world record-setting game used to be the most resistant community in our state for the D&D stuff. So like, think about that. The world record was just set in a community that less than 30 years ago was almost anti D&D.
Wow.
Like, blows my mind.
So I can get why they don't want to rock that boat. Like the new version of D&D, is it required? Is it time? I mean, if you start counting the years, it's about time traditionally to do this. I don't know that 5th edition needed a bigger enough refresh. They kind of like, let's be straight up honest. When 5th edition was coming out, there was a lot of talk about it being the final edition for a few reasons, because 4th edition had crashed so badly that they didn't want to take a big risk.
Right. Well, and as James just pointed out in chat, this has happened before with the Pathfinder Hydra. So
they don't want to rock the boat too much, because you could get a Pathfinder. You could try to do a 4th edition, and you get a Pathfinder. And I want to go on record, even though I am a humongous Pathfinder fan, that I am not a 4th edition hater. I played a lot of 4th edition. I played several campaigns through 4th edition from 1st to 30th level.
Yeah, my 4th edition drama happens to come from the fact that if you look in the player's handbook, you can find my name. And I was a playtester for it, and I got ignored like a lot. And so that was my drama about 40. And it did make me more interested in Pathfinder, and that's why I went that way. But like, I actually went back and mined some of the design space, because there's some great ideas in there still. And I will still say this: the codified skill challenge rules that everybody uses in almost every game system pretty much come from 4E.
It was a good system. Skill challenges was a legitimately great idea.
Yeah. And that sort of additive success pile has become the foundation of tons of other game systems, even outside of the D20 schema.
Yeah. It's like one of those ideas that you explain it and it's just like, oh, that is effortless to adapt to any game.
Anything. Yeah.
Because all games have skill checks or some sort of way to check whether or not you succeed at something. And all you're doing is just counting successes versus failures as a group participation. It is such an easy, cool idea.
And it allows really not D&D things to be modeled in D&D. Like I was running on TikTok, I did a live streamed game of Strixhaven, and they made parade floats for a parade, and it was a skill challenge situation. And then I burned them all to ash. But I did have them spend several hours building first.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway,
I mean, I still use them. Like, eventually Pathfinder came up with its own twist to it, which is just, instead of tracking successes and failures, events just had hit point totals, basically. You whittled them down to 0. But I was still using skill challenges like when I was playing Pathfinder 1st edition, and like from day one. It was just such an easy way to handle those things. But 5th edition isn't the only thing trying to compete against 5th edition, or 5.5 is what they're calling the official one.
Are they actually calling it officially that? I thought they weren't.
Yeah,
they have said 5.5 now.
Yeah, they have said 5.5, which is honestly a fair choice. Like that's the safest bet they could make. And right now, boy, Watsy needs to stop rocking the boat. Because very recently, the OGL drama means that they have suddenly spawned a lot of competition where
one black guy
would not have had it. And majorly, one of the main ones was Project Black Flag from Kobold Press. Lots of people were looking forward to what Kobold Press would do. Kobold Press is a fantastic publisher of role-playing game material. Indeed. They were so good that they were hired to make some of the official D&D material. So like the quality of their work is top notch, and they've got a great creative team. Wolfgang Bauer knows how to make projects happen. And knows to do them on Kickstarter.
He worked on my Kickstarter, and he was amazing.
And so they have announced finally the new name for Project Black Flag, which is Tales of the Valiant. Also saying that it will be backwards compatible with 5th edition, because and this one will probably be closer to 5th edition than 5.5.
I think you're right.
Yeah, because let's be honest, they're trying to Pathfinder 5th edition, and
that's
a noble effort.
And I think they will be fairly successful doing so.
Yeah. I don't know honestly at this point. Like I don't know how much people have just gone back to D&D at this point. That now that they've made the concessions they've made, I think a
Hmm.
lot of people will probably. I
Yep.
think they've mitigated a lot of their damage with that, and assuming they can keep from burning the house down for 5 minute wizards. We're not going to talk about the other big wizards
We're
drama
not
this
going
month.
to,
No, we're
but
not
go
going to.
Google it if you
Go
want to
Google
see
Wizards of the
the
Coast and
endless,
Pinkertons.
yes, endless pile of
Oh my
messes.
gosh. Wizards, please, to goodness, work with your marketing team more often. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
yeah.
So, Project Black Flag is now Tales the Valiant. Not a fan of that name, I'll be
Me
honest with you. I
either,
think Project
honestly.
Black Flag was a cooler name.
I agree. I agree.
Hmm.
Um,
Um,
I
but
do,
hey, it's
but
a name.
it kind of quietly. I don't know if you noticed. MT Black dropped Iscanadar, which was MT Black, who's an incredible third-party creator for 5e
Hmm.
on DM's Guild, and it's also compatible. And this, the reason I bring it up, because Tales of the Valiant, if they do this, this is actually my ideal situation because
Hmm.
I want to have 4 players handbooks that are all relatively compatible, so I can just
Hmm.
say this is how it's going to work at my table, and it's going to be drawn from all of them.
Oh my
And
gosh. You're gonna have somebody rock up with a 5.5 playing with a character from Tales of the Valiant.
I've done it. I've done it at my table already for years. I had 3 5
Mhm.
characters with Pathfinder first edition characters with, and it worked. It's fine as long as the systems are close enough. And that's what I want. I was actually really bummed out to find out that MCDM, Matt Colville's company, is officially saying it's not a D20 game. So they're actually not doing a 5e game, which I think is very bold and scary for him. And I hope it
Okay,
goes well. But
so you've jumped ahead a little bit.
I
What are we
did.
talking about? Because it's not the only game to come out. Actually, I have a little bit more to talk about Tales of the Valiant real
Let's go.
quick
Let's go.
because
I want to. You might know more than I do, so let's hear it.
okay, they're doing a Kickstarter,
Yep.
but the timing of this was not great because Green Ronin had made an announcement that they have partnered with Valiant Comics to release an RPG called Valiant Adventures.
I did not know this. That's funny.
So, also launching at the same time frame.
Grown.
This is going to cause infinite amounts of confusion between these two brands.
Is it
Green Ronin is also an amazing company, and
absolutely?
all and these two games will not have much to do with each other, except they will both be T20 games
So is
because
Valiant gonna be
it
Mutants
is
Masterminds
based off the
compatible?
Mutants and Masterminds
Awesome.
game. So it
Again,
will be a D20 game, but it's about the Valiant universe of heroes and comics. And so that's like Faith and Exo Manowar
yeah.
and those sorts of characters. Valiant Comics has been around for a while now. They do really good stuff. The writing on their comics is really good. They like to explore a lot of spaces that other comics don't really go very often. So definitely is an interesting choice, a good land for them, a good fit for Mutants and Masterminds.
Yep.
Also a place that I would hope to get. Listen here, Green Running, get you some 3D printed minis out in the world. I can't. I
Please.
want.
Yeah.
Nobody's doing superhero minis. Nobody's doing superhero minis.
C27 and RNE Studio really are kind of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I would love that actually. If you're creative, they had an old version of the DC game that was also Mutants Masterminds compatible, and it's not too hard to figure out how to make those stats pop right over to the 3rd edition. So
Yeah. So good stuff, good stuff. But
very
this is going
very
to
good.
make things very confusing. And then you mentioned that, of course, there's another big name coming in with another 2 fantasy games to
Oh
compete for
yes.
this crown.
How confident do you have to be to not only launch your own compatible to 5e or like 5e game? I don't know if it's going to be compatible. I kind of hope it is too, because again, I would be so ecstatic to have a whole bunch of cool rules engines that were interchangeable. But you have to be Critical Role confident to drop 2 brand new games in the same year. They're doing a rules light Illuminated Worlds, which is going to be their like narrative driven, more rules light frilly not nuts and bolts, not D20. It's going to be a die pool system, from what I understand. And then Daggerheart, which is going to be their D20, more high fantasy, and they have really doubled down on high fantasy, high magic fantasy RPG with D20 rules backing. So I suspect it's going to be a little bit more towards the Pathfinder side of things, because that's where they started. But it'll be interesting to see how compatible it is with 5e. I actually kind of hope it still is pretty compatible, frankly, but we'll see. Previews of both those at Gen Con, from what I understand.
Yeah. This is going to be a very eventful Gen Con. So the question I have is, we've got all these systems coming into play.
Mm-hmm.
Many of those systems are going to be open systems, because either if they're D20, they kind of have to be, because that's the deal. That's the deal you make.
Again, I hope so, but we'll see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because with the Creative Commons, you could technically release your content as not
Creative
open.
Content Commons, because it wasn't the share alike clause included in that license.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, but this hopefully be open. So the question I have is, in a year from now or 2 years from now, when these systems have established their audience, do you see who do you see like Archvillain Games publishing stats for? Or who do you see Artisan Guild publishing stats for? What kind of adventures am I going to get with my cast and play set?
I'm still betting that we're going to see, I think Tales of the Valiant will be close enough to 5.5. It'll be close enough that you will see people try to shoot down the middle, and they'll just say with fantasy role-playing stats, or with D20 fantasy role-playing stats, compatible with your favorite games. I think we're going to see a lot of people kind of vaguing it out, and I actually am here for that. I am. I think the more the merrier, the more people, because if you're not familiar with the current mindset, you have to be kind of a maverick, whatever, somebody who's willing to take some looks under your hood to even throw in. Like, I know people that like twitch when they bring in Tasha's just past the player's handbook, and you're going to see those people who are willing to like kit bash and bring all these systems together, and you're going to see people who will be like, no, I'm 5.5 core only, or I'm Tales of the Valiant only, or whatever. And the people who go out in the weeds are going to go out in the weeds. I mean, the 5.0 or whatever, 5.0, that can be weird to say. 5th edition community as it stands right now is already super into like, oh, go grab this thing from this old 2nd edition book, or go on DM's Guild and get this like supplemental system for downtime activities. And that's becoming very normal. If you're content hungry in 5e, there's just not enough. You are already digging and modding and tweaking. And I think the video game culture of DLC, download your mod, do your thing, is becoming embedded in tabletop too. So I think we're going to see more vague. There might be people who partnership and get some sort of advantage kickback on it, but I don't know that we're going to see people like shut out people at this point. I don't think it's going to happen.
I see a lot of people continuing to publish quote unquote 5e compatible stats, because all these games are using the compatible with 5e language, and that would be a very easy shortcut to shoot down that middle with language that's already being used to promote these games.
Well, yeah, even Tales of the Valiant, I believe, says the heart of 5e is what it's like in there.
And all over their material, they're talking about the same things. Like, you can play these characters right next to already generated 5th edition characters and all their 5th edition books. So Coldwell Press has a vested interest in Deep Magic still selling copies. With their new game. So they're not going to rock the boat too much on what Tales of the Valiant is going to be able to do. I really like a lot of the playtest material I've seen for Tales of the Valiant. It's a really cool idea. I like what they're doing with the magic system. I think that's a really good way to round that corner and make magic a little bit easier to support on the end.
Curious what specifically you're talking about there.
Like doing what the PF2 did, where they're putting magic in schools instead of so that you don't have to. In previous editions of the game, if you make a new class that is a magic caster, and then you want to support that class later, and this was the curse. This was the curse of spellcasters for 3rd edition. is that this really cool spellcaster class would come out in some book, and then no book would ever reference that class again. So the little bitty spell list you had in that book was all the spells you would ever get. And it doesn't matter how much the next book of awesome spells, if your name wasn't wizard, cleric, druid, bard, or sorcerer, you didn't get new spells.
Yeah. Let's see. I designed around that really fast, but go on.
Pathfinder committed. They committed in Pathfinder First Edition to making sure that all their classes would keep getting spell support throughout all their books, and they did a great job. But I made the spell cards for Pathfinder, the ones that everybody uses, and it got real dang hard to fit them all on cards once the list of classes had to wrap around pages, because all the spells were like Wizard 3, Witch 3, Sorcerer 3, Factotum 2. It's just like every class got a different listing in the spells on what level this spell was for them. And so what Pathfinder 2 did, and what Tales of the Valiant doing, is saying, hey, there are X number of types of spell casting. Usually there's going to be your arcane casting, your divine casting, your nature casting under different names. And sometimes they throw in occult casting for like weird
or
Cthulhu
psychic
stuff.
or whatever.
Yeah, or psychic. And spells are this kind of casting this level, and eventually, and your class just says, I cast off this list.
See, I don't like it.
Don't like it.
I don't like it. And
you don't like it.
The easy fix, in my opinion, is you have your core cast list that you introduce with your new class, and then you just say, and bard enchantment spells. So you use class and whatever. So what I'm going to have to do in the design space for these post the spell type things is be like occult spells from the enchantment school or whatever. Like, I think descriptors are the way to go. Just tag everything with descriptors. When I was actually working on a rewrite for Sorcerer, and I never got official contract, so I never released it. But my Sorcerer was completely descriptor based. It was not spell list based. So it was like, you can cast fire spells of these levels. You can, and I think that is another way to manage that isn't bulky, that you can infinitely expand as well. So I think descriptors is a better way to go, but that's my 2 cents.
Descriptors are an interesting way to go and allows for a lot more granularity, but that does make looking them up hard.
I think an online index could serve that purpose just fine.
You have to have software involved at that point. Yeah. And I do like my games to be available without the power on.
Sure. But again, a downloadable PDF that someone could print off on 3 pieces of paper would be fine too. I don't know. This is just from my background, and I realize that a lot of people are cheering that my demographics aging out, but anyway.
Okay, so we don't know what games we're going to be playing in 2 years, and we're good thing is, like, we're going to Gen Con. We will be back on the podcast to talk about what happened at Gen Con and what we saw. Because there's a whole lot going down at Gen Con this year. And in the role-playing space especially, but at that point, like 10th edition Warhammer is going to be at Gen Con. So, and old world content is going to be announced and probably showed off at Gen Con, because GW is going to be there. And like a lot of news is coming out in the wargaming space as well. So, hey, we're going to have a ton of stuff to talk about when we come back from that trip in August. All right. Do you have anything to shout out to, Kristen?
Not so much. David did mention that there's going to be a big dragon demon set also with the same time as the dogs for dragon trappers. So that's coming up in June. Don't let yourself miss out on it. There's also going to be a really cool Sylvan theme set. And I'm not sponsored or in any way affiliated with Dragon Trappers Lodge, but the minis and the preview art looks good. So.
Right. I have some professional ties with Dragon Trappers Lodge. So,
I don't, and I was the one who said it.
Yeah, so small disclaimer there. But it does look really cool. They got this like basically big kaiju type super monster set that looks really cool. So yeah, do check it out. And I don't have anything to shout out to this month. We've got some fun guests coming up in some upcoming episodes. We are definitely looking for more guest suggestions. If you've got some suggestions for guests, please let us know. We are
Or if any of the creators who are often sitting in our chat anyway want to be on the
right.
show, since you're already here.
Yeah. Looking at you specifically, Herberto.
Or
I know we've had you on recently, but we'll happily have you on again.
Yeah.
But until next time, if you want more of our show and to listen to our previous episode, you can do so at printyourgames.com. And if you want to support the show, the best way you can do so is by sharing the podcast around or giving us a 5-star review on iTunes or Spotify. That's the absolute best thing you could do to help the show out right now, for sure. And also, we can have some fun when you contact us on our socials at facebook.com/printyourgames or twitter.com/printyourgames. We are available on YouTube at youtube.com/Param. Until next time, I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Param.
I'm Christian Sowards, also known as Seventh Mastery, and don't forget to use your screen protector.